Welcome to Business on Purpose, the podcast for hardworking entrepreneurs who drive our economy. I'm your host, Barry Barrett, and as a sales leader and business owner, I understand the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. Each episode, I am interviewing business owners who have faced the same struggles you have. Low revenue, a lack of scalability in their sales force. Together, we're going to explore their entrepreneurial journey and uncover the valuable lessons they've learned along the way. From mentors to advice, we'll dive deep into what has helped these business owners get unstuck and move forward towards success. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned entrepreneur, the podcast is for you. Be sure and follow and subscribe to this podcast as we learn from the experiences of successful business owners and navigate the road to entrepreneurship together. Let's get started. So tell me what you've been into.
Man, I'm always inside of an organization somewhere. I'm really big on coaches that still do it. It's not just the teacher that doesn't know how to do it, but they're willing to teach you. And for me, that's what they get, is someone that's still in the house. I don't get to sell very often, but I am in the house quite often with other sales reps. I think that many people saw on Facebook where I was with an Amish company, and he's like, I just want to watch you sell. And he got a chance to watch what my process is in action. And the guy was just in awe of it. But I told him, I said, this is, now granted, I've been doing this 20 years, but it's still the same thing that I've been teaching you. I mean, it's no different. It's not like I teach one thing and do another. I do everything that I teach. And when it comes to the coaching and the speaking, which is what I do most of the time, I speak for organizations all over the country, Canada and Mexico, and it's all on sales, understanding the philosophy behind sales, not so much the psychology, but the philosophy.
That's funny. Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little bit of why, but
yeah, it's good. What's funny, what I was talking about, so we're doing an online course. We're releasing an online course. The first bit is sales psychology. And then the second module is sales philosophy.
I like that.
And so when you said not so much the philosophy, not the psychology, but the philosophy, right?
So I see so many trainers and they want to talk about, this part of your brain and that part of your brain. It's like, nobody cares about this. What the people want to know is, why am I doing it? Why am I scripted? Why do I need to say this? And why do I say it in that fashion? And so that's where we get into the psychology of it. But I just don't want to be the psychiatrist that wants to tell you what part of the brain that comes out of, because nobody cares. You're not going to say, hey, by the way, I did that because it came right here.
Yeah, I don't teach that. So yes. But I'm not like, I don't care about that. I care about why it works.
Right.
So my philosophy is less like where it comes from in the brain, whether it's amygdala, the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, or the temporal lobe. It doesn't freaking matter where it comes from, what parts. But the reason I love psychology is the X's and O's and the ones and zeros of why it works.
That's right.
So when somebody says, for instance, why does a client say no? I tell them they don't. I've never heard a client say no. They give you a reason. So the psychology of overcoming objections, why that's important is because when you train salespeople to overcome a no and they never get it, they don't know what to say.
Right.
So triggers are triggered by words. And so the reason a client will give you is what we mean by no. And 99% of the reason they tell you they shouldn't do something is the exact reason they should.
That's right.
That's all psychology. Your philosophy will overcome that psychology, right? So the philosophy is we're doing it for people, not to people.
That's correct.
So when they say they can't do something or they won't because of this reason, then we get into the 5 hesitators. There's only 5 in the whole world, but we can get into that later. That's good. I love what you're doing. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Chuck Thokey. He can go by Charles, whatever it is. I always go by Chuck because that's how I knew him. I've known Chuck for a very long time. He was my sales manager, trained me for a little bit, and I learned a lot from him. And so we, over the years, have learned from each other. And he's not just a sales trainer or a speaker in his realm, but he's also a practitioner. And one of the things that I love about him is he really does believe that the idea is those who can't do, teach. But Chuck believes that those who can also teach and can do, and that's why they got the right to be able to teach. So I want to welcome one of my mentors, the people that I've respected for so many years in this life, Chuck Thokey. Welcome to the show.
Man, Barry, this is an absolute honor because when you and I met, you blew me away in Lexington, and I was sitting there, and I'd never hire anybody right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there looking around. I'm like, why am I waiting? This guy has just blown me away. I'm sure that we're going to get into some of this, but some of the backstories between you and I and things that have transpired along the way. But man, this is amazing. Watching you where you are today, and then you talking to me about where I am, from where we were to where we are today.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Your backstory is much more of a refined. You're from better chops than I am, I think, but that's okay. Oh, that's good. So Chuck, tell us, how did you get your start?
Man, I got my start through Bathfitter. I was in aerospace engineering. 9/11.
That's what I'm talking about, the backstory. Aerospace engineer. How old were you?
I was 19.
Yeah. When I was 19, engineer. I'd never even heard those words. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was the youngest aerospace engineer in the country. And then 9/11 happened and things just broke loose. Nobody's buying airplanes when something tragic like that happens.
Yeah.
And I was in a necessity trying to figure out what to do next. And long story short, got into sales and ended up in mortgage, where I could sell, I could mortgage your doghouse at that point.
Yeah.
It was so easy to sell money way back then. And it was just amazing how fun that was and how much money was in it. But then we all knew that it was all going to come to an end. And that bubble burst, and I got thrown into home improvement. Thankfully, I got thrown into home improvement and never looked back since. Bathfitter, I sat down and I was going to be their VP of sales. And during that interview, because he didn't know who I was, the guy before me was like 68 years old, and here I am in my 20s. And the guy that owned Bathfitter, he looks at me and goes, "What are you, like 10?" And I'm like, and he says, "Hey, 11. I got this other position." When he saw me, he was trying to sell me on a whole different position, some kind of outside events thing. And so I was like, that's not the position that I came in here for. And finally, he gave me the opportunity, and it was a kind of a match made in heaven, if you will. Yeah. We exploded that business, did very well, and then got into the company called Able Roof, which is now the largest residential roofing company in the United States.
Wow.
And since then, man, I've made 10 other companies to be the largest in the country.
Yeah, that's good.
That's through their sales department. People are like, "Oh man, we want you to help out with our business." No, you need to go check out this guy named Barry for that.
Yeah.
That sales piece, or that understanding that sales team.
Yeah.
That's what I specialize in, man. I stay in my lane.
That's so good, man. So you went from Bathfitters, and then now you're the original guy who owned Bathfitters. He bought Able Roof, or is that not? Did I not follow?
No. Able Roof, the person that bought out Able, which anybody that knows anything about siding, crane siding,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
the crane group bought out Able, and then they went looking for somebody that could turn everything around, which they really didn't need anybody to turn it around. Even when I got there, they asked me, like, "Hey, we already have market share. What are you going to do?" And the first 6 months, I took them from 28% closing to 60%.
Oh, wow.
Closing. That was just in 6 months.
What's your biggest, because I've been training salespeople for many years, and I know you have too. Everybody wants to know the newest closing technique. That's the sexy part of sales. And I'm like, right, you still get it, right? 20 years ago, I could close. And I think that's one of the things that you liked. I'd come in and close and ask you 1,000 questions and get you to buy. And you're like, what happened? But now that I'm 46, I don't have to do that because my sales process has improved so much that they get to the end of the sale. The only way to say it is they either do or they don't. And all the closing techniques go out the door because you did those throughout the whole sale. So when you come in, what is one of the top things that you get people to understand to get them to close so quickly?
What I take a look at inside of the one call close, because that's usually what people want to look at, is the new
Right.
call close where it's not
Mm-hmm.
high pressure, but it's, for the most part, it's everything before the close. As you were just talking about,
Yeah.
is we're going to build, if it's bath fitter, we're going to build the golden toilet, or if it's roofing, we're building out the roof. But the most important thing is that the blue ocean strategy.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
tell people, I'm like, hey, don't read the book because it's really boring, but I'm gonna sum it up. You have the blue ocean and red ocean. And
Yeah.
99% of everybody in home improvement are in the red ocean, which is the bloodbath. They all do
Mm-hmm.
the exact same thing. The
Yeah.
other thing is, if you ever come to Top Rep, which is our event, you'll hear me say over and over again that sales reps are lazy, but I'm a
Mm-hmm.
champion. And the
Yeah.
reason why we say that is because sales reps are generally trained by the homeowner or
Mm-hmm.
by their customer. They come out of the gate, they're very good at what they do, and then they let the customer train them, and they get really lazy. And
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you ask me, how do they raise their close rate or how do they close so quickly? It's because we understand that we're going to do it differently. We're going to explain it differently. We're going to bring that perception of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's like, oh, I want to learn the scripts. I'm like, the scripts are about that much. Perception is that much.
People are asking for scripts now. That's a different one because I think people do hear these scripts, and I'm a firm believer in scripts. But tell me about perception. How do you get people to change your perception of the homeowner?
It's not about changing the perception. It's about managing the perception. So
Ah,
when you get to the house, if we're going to talk home improvement, when you get to the house, these sales reps, when they say they're lazy, like if we're going to get on the roof, they're up there with just nothing but a phone going around and checking out the roof. Our sales reps, they're going to go up there with a tool belt on. They may not even know what's in it. But as long as they have it on and they sound like the telephone man, that's a perception that we give off to the homeowner.
that's good.
And we have a quick story of a guy that I knew this guy for a long time, and he was there before we got there. The guy's been in it for 30 years. He probably knows more about roofing than anybody I've ever met. And he was there before us. My guy was there for 2 days. He's been on the job for 2 days, actually running appointments.
Yeah.
And when he got on the roof, he managed the perception. He had everything he needed. That homeowner's like, is he going to fix the roof while he's up there? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't know. I hope not, because he doesn't know what he's doing. But that's who he went with because we manage the perception. People aren't looking for the expert. They're looking for the person they perceive as the expert.
That's right. I spent the last, 8 years in the automotive repair industry, and I've never worked on a vehicle in my life. I've never, to this day, why would I do that? I've got brothers that do that. And when people would call me, and I trained this for years, sales reps, they would call me and I'd say, hey, thank you for calling Auto Excel. This is Barry. How may I help you? And just that professionalism, that initial, and then it's the next thing out of their mouth is exactly what they're looking for. I'm like, I'm happy to help you with that. When you say, I'm happy to help you with that. And I would tell people, I don't care what they said. One guy called me one time and he had a BMW, and I could tell the phone number that came through was in like 4 hours from there. Now, they got cell phones, things like that. That's great. But the guy was 4 hours from me. I said, I can help you with that. And so what I did was I found shops local to him that specialize in BMW. I didn't care about the sale. And I think that's part of the perception, right? And I think I learned this from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, I call it commission breath. You did not learn that from you.
Yeah.
I still teach it today.
Good.
And what you're talking about, the perception is that commission breath where people, I say, you get pulled over at night, the cop, if you've been drinking, which we don't approve of, he will say you could smell it on their breath, and so he gets you out. That's how sales reps show up to places. They got commission breath, like people have alcoholic breath. So I learned that from you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 we
that's
talk
good.
about that all the time, or the hypothetical baseball bat that you take into the appointment with you because your rent's due, you're 2 months behind on your car payment, and you're going to just beat them into submission again, whether you have commission breath because you just stink at what you do,
Mhm.
or you're going to go in there and just start bashing the other companies
Ooh,
and beating up the homeowner.
yeah,
It
it
just
doesn't
isn't
work.
going to work.
It's
No,
funny. I used to have a sales manager that says you really need to take out a lot of debt so you can pay for it, so you can be motivated.
that's
And
right.
I'm thinking now, I'm 46. That's the worst advice I can give. Like I have a house payment. That's it today. And the best thing that ever happened to me is I don't need my customers' money. I'm like, look, I really want to serve you. And I think one of the best things that I do is, and I've learned it from my mentors, is tell people, look, I don't need another customer. I want to serve another customer. But if you show up and you're not the right person, I do not want to work with you. It's the worst.
Yes,
I love that you're teaching people to come in and it's about perception because perception is reality. And so
exactly right.
you're not telling them to fake it. You're telling them to be that type of person. Tell me about
Right.
that.
So when you're looking at, if you want them to see you as the expert, you have to get them to perceive you as the expert. And so that's why we dress the part. When
Mm-hmm.
there's many times when I say, hey, you need to dress the part, and the guy shows up in shirt and a tie, and I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about.
That's not the part.
That is not the part. You are a contractor, or you are. I was working with these large companies that sell hydraulics, and I says, I'm hoping that you're not going into these sales appointments with shirt and a tie. Hopefully, you have a nice button-down shirt. But I don't know about you, but I've always been told don't trust a man in a suit.
Yeah, that's
Take this,
right.
you
Yeah,
know,
100%.
and
It's different than it was 30 years ago.
yeah,
I wear in my session rooms, I wear jeans and a polo. You
right,
never would have told me I was going to wear jeans to anything 20 years ago.
correct. Same here.
Yeah, it's
Same here.
amazing.
But when we're looking at the perception, there's perception inside of when you're going through the product itself. If you have the same product as the next three people that come in, all you have to do is just talk about it in a different way. But you also know that your competition is lazy. When they come in, they're going to do the bare minimum. So make
Mm-hmm.
sure that your sales reps do exactly what they're supposed to do in the house. They're going to go a little bit further. They're going to put that product in their hands. They're going to talk about it differently. But because when you leave the house and you've made a sale and you turn back to the homeowner and say, hey, before I leave, do you mind if I ask, what was it that made you buy? And it's the first answer that every homeowner gives you or every customer gives you. It's because of you. So if you want to be different, you need to be different.
That's
Nobody
right.
really cares so much about the product or the company. They want the solution and they want you.
That's right. Yeah. I teach Me Too moments. Like somebody comes in, you never be the reason we talked about it earlier, you interviewed me, we just got along as soon as we met. The reason is because we had so much in common and neither one of us were making anything up. We were just saying, oh, yeah, me too. And people say, well, if I don't have anything in common with somebody, I'm like, you're both humans. For
Yeah,
God's sakes, that's a good place to start. And so many people, especially when they into sales, they treat people, they're weird about it.
right.
Man, they just want you to be a human. What should I say? I do have a script, but you have to be so practiced that it doesn't sound like one. Because the truth is, everybody has a script. It's just that most people's scripts suck.
Most of them do.
Most of them do, right? And so you walk into a home, and what is the number one thing or one of the top things that you tell people when you walk into someone's home?
So when you go into a home, one of the first things that we want to do is make sure that we have the environment for a presentation to take place. You probably remember that from way back.
Yeah.
Is do we have all homeowners? Do we have enough time? You might get there and they only have a half hour. Then you can't do anything in a half an hour.
Nope.
And do you have a need that do they have a need that we can satisfy? So we're going to go through a script and make sure that all of that is available. Then we're going to narrate what's going to happen. So when we do in-home sales, we're going to make sure that we do an entry and warm up so that that homeowner doesn't have that anxiety of wondering what's actually going to happen today. Is this going to be like this 4-hour window meeting that we used to have way back in the day?
That's so good.
Yeah. And so all that has to be scripted.
Yeah, 100%. You talked about there's 5 hesitators that every person's going to give you. There's only 5 in the world, and people call them objections. I call them hesitators because I looked up the definition of objections and then the hesitators. And what we really do is people are hesitant to make a decision. They're not objecting to you or your product, your service, or whatever. They're hesitant on what decision because there's some things available there that they're just trying to make decisions on. You said decision. So number one, you said, do we have everybody that is going to be involved in the decision present? In your world, it's the homeowners. Are all the homeowners present? Man, woman, what are they? Are they there? Because I don't care who you are. We've said it a million times. If one of them is not there, you cannot make a decision, and you are not going to be able to deliver my presentation like I could. So they're not going to get the value of what's here.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
So there's no need. These are the 5. Number 1, there's no need. Number 2, no want.
Right.
Number 3, no time. Number 4 is no trust. And number 5 is no money. Those are the only 5 things in the world that people are hesitant about. And so when I was looking at it, you're like, are we going to have enough time? Is it going to be the old 4-hour presentation or pitch? I hate the word pitch. And so I call them bookends. In the beginning, what I do differently today than I never did back then, I wish I'd have known this. I'd say, hey, Chuck, before we get started, here's what I need you to know. And I tell them how everything's going to go. And I didn't do that 20 years ago. Is that what you're talking about when you said like setting the expectation?
That's it. You're just setting the rules of the game is all you're doing. You're
That's
putting
good.
it out in front of them so they know what to expect, but they also understand what I expect.
That's good. Yeah. I still actually teach it's a concept called the expectation gap. And when there is you walk into a store, you have an expectation as a customer that you want. I guarantee you that does not line up exactly to what that store's expectation of what they are going to bring is. There's some sort of misalignment unless it's like Disney or Coca-Cola or something that has this big marketing budget that taught you what to expect. But so it's on the person giving the presentation, it's on them to close that gap of expectation. So that's why it's called the expectation gap. And so that's what you're doing. So what's one of the ways that you close that gap?
One of the easiest ways is through that entry and warm-up statement. You're going to let them know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, by the way, when you called in, did the people on the phone, did they explain to you what to expect from me today? When they're going to say no, because we don't, they're going to say, hey, great. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to have you take me around the inside of the house. Once we get through with you showing me any leaks or any concerns that you have on the inside, I'm going to jump up in the attic and we do a full attic inspection. So I'm going to take them through the entire process of what I plan on doing. But I'm also going to let them know one of the last things I'm going to do is I'm going to let them know that I'm going to ask for your business.
Yeah, that's good. How do you do that? Do you just say it that way?
I'm just going to say it that way. And the very last thing that I'm going to do, if all the stars are aligned, is I'm going to ask you for your business.
Yeah. That's good. I'm a business coach, and that's one thing I say before we get started. You're going to have to answer 3 questions at the end of this. So number 1, is this the right system for you? Is EOS the right system for you? If that's a yes, then we can move on to number 2. If that's a no, then we can just stop right there. If number 2, am I the right implementer to help you? If that's a no and the first one's a yes, I'll introduce you to somebody that is right for you. I'm good. There's 450 of us. I think there's over 500 now. And then the last is affordability. If the first 2 are a yes and the third one's a no, then it's a no. Because if you can't afford it, if it is not right for you. I do not want you entering into something that you can't afford. It's not right for me. It's not right for you. It's not right for us. But if all 3 of those is a yes, then obviously it's pretty easy. And here's the last one, Chuck, and I took this from my mentor, Dan Gilly. He said, there's actually 3 no. There's a no, there's a yes, and there's a maybe. And Chuck, are we adults?
Yes.
Can we just know that maybe is a no, and let's move on with our lives?
I love how you say that. We do something similar. Say, hey, I can take a no as gracefully as I can take a yes. It's the maybes that junk up my desk. Let's jump past that one. So I love how you say that.
Yeah, maybe's a no. And so we'll just move on. And it's given them permission to say no. Just, we can stop it anytime you want. We're good. That's the opposite of commission breath, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's so good. So tell me, I know where you got your start. You are still a practitioner, so you're still working as a sales manager?
In many cases, I'll go into organizations as I guess you can say a partial VP of sales.
Yeah. Give me
Right
your
now,
business model. Let's do it that way. Just give me your business model. What are you doing today?
so first and foremost, what I do is I coach for both the owners and the sales managers on
Mm-hmm.
how to take care of their sales team. Once we get past that, then there's a lot of these companies that are very small and they don't have enough, or they don't have that sales manager. And we can come in as an interim sales manager and help them
Gotcha.
build where they need to be. And then I build my own exit plan. That way they don't
Mm-hmm.
have to say, hey, by the way, Chuck, I think we're ready. Well, I'm going to show you that I'm going to get you ready.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
we can only do that for so many people or so many companies, because
Yeah.
I only trust myself to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to bring in somebody that used to be a sales manager, and I really hope they do you a good job. So if I'm going to come in as an interim sales manager or interim VP, I'm doing that myself. But when we come into the coaching, there's many times where I'll coach some and then I'll have someone else do something similar.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good. So when you engage, how many people are you working with today?
So right now I'm working with it really fluctuates because we have that top rep event. So if we
Right.
say how many we actually work with,
Gotcha.
it could be hundreds, but right now I only take on about 10 clients at a time.
Gotcha.
I
Yeah, and
really
that's a
want to
great.
focus in.
Yeah, 10 clients is a lot. I talk, it's just
Me too.
especially how much hands-on that you have to do with people. Because if you're coaching, training, teaching, and you have a model to where they can hire you as their sales manager, that's a lot of in-depth time. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, 10's a load. I think people who don't do this for a living, they don't think that's it. I'm a lot more hands-off than you are. I do a different thing. Actually, we have a sales trainer that trains for us in our business. So we have two sides. We have EOS and we have sales training. But you specialize in roofing, or is it
Home improvement in general.
home
Yep.
improvement in general? Good. Yeah, that's awesome. Your top rep event once a year. When is it?
So we were doing it. We did 6 in a year our first year, did 4 last year. And that's only because
Oh, wow.
we try to do 2 and we get so many messages. We want another. So
Yeah.
we'll just pick a time and a date and it sells out pretty quick. But it's a boot camp. It's not something where you're just going to come sit behind this table and just start taking notes.
Yeah, it's so
It
good.
is a boot camp. When you come out there, you're leaving with the ability to do it by the time you go home.
How many days is it?
So that's 2 days.
So it's a 2-day event.
Yeah.
Nice. And so do people go to your website for that? What do they do?
Yeah, so they can go to topreptraining.com.
Yeah.
Our next one is at the end of February in New Braunfels, Texas. And we're getting close to selling out. So it'd be a good opportunity for anybody that wants to check it out. But man, it's that in itself. You're not going to find another sales event where
Right.
you're going to leave with understanding actually how to do it and being able to do it. You're not going to find it anywhere else in the United States or Canada that we do right there. And the reason why is because Jim, my partner, and I have been to just about every sales training you can, just like you, just a
Right.
student of it. We
Yeah,
love it so much.
100%.
And then we laid everything out and say, this is the problem with all these events. Let's make this one. And so when we first started, these people are hitting numbers that this industry's never seen before.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah, you visited. I had a 5-day. It was automotive repair. I had a 5-day class, and you visited and was a guest speaker there, and I really appreciated that. Blew their minds. But yeah, similar thing when you have a trainer that knows what the heck they're doing, and it's immersive. I think that's what the big thing. You're immersive. You're making them role play. You're having them go through scenarios. Is that basically how it's set up? A lot of it.
It is. When we say top rep, it's like Top Gun. So
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
things called dog fights where
Yeah.
the sales reps get into small groups and they compete for the most part. Now they
Yeah.
work together, but at the end, they'll rate each other.
Dude,
And what they
I might have to. I'm not even in a home improvement anymore. I might have to go just to see how I am because this is a dog fight. I'd be in.
I would love to have you. There's many times where I'll explain, hey, I want to tell you this story. There's this guy, and I want to get into this story whenever we
Yeah,
can.
let's do that. We can do
But
that now. I like. I
uh,
remember the story vaguely, so you're gonna have to. So we'll
I
set it up. Just set it up, and I'll let you tell the story because I'll give the truth scope, so it might not be completely right.
so you came up to Dayton for training. We were sitting there the entire week. And I get this phone call from a friend of mine that she goes, hey, you want to come out, take a look? My dad's already going to do it. She'd already lined up the material and that her dad was going to do the entire bathroom remodel. And I said, this would be great because I'm training a guy right now. And it gives me the opportunity to watch him do this in the house and get his feet wet and not have to worry about him losing a sale. And she goes, yeah, I'd love to. So you and I went out there, and the first thing you said was you talked about their windows.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, look at the windows. And you were talking about their windows. We went inside and they had a rainbow vacuum cleaner. And you looked over and you saw it and you just grinned at me. And it just couldn't have been any better. But we went through everything. And there were certain times where you knew exactly what you're doing. And there are other times where I could tell that because this is your first time.
Yeah.
You did windows for a living before this.
Right.
And now it's baths. And so you muddled your way through it. But when you got into the close, when we got down to that table, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And you asked for the order, you presented price, and it went silent. They stared at the paper and you stared at the paper. And I'm wondering, I'm like, oh my gosh, Barry just froze. I'm like, I'm going to have to jump in here. But looking at your face, I'm like, it doesn't look like he froze. And it felt like 10 minutes. It was probably about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
But it felt like 10 minutes. And she looked at him and he looked at her and he's, what do you think, honey? Man, if I could have wet myself right there in their chair, I've never seen anything like it. When we left, I was like, I thought you froze. And your exact words to me were, they weren't ready yet. When you think of that, the phrase that the first person that speaks loses,
yes,
I've never seen it done so well. And at that moment, I have always looked at you as a mentor. One of the things that you mentioned that is, who are your mentors? You truly are. And you were back then when you recited every piece of Tom Hopkins. Tom Hopkins doesn't even know Tom Hopkins as well as you do.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I've been a student my whole life, and that's why I teach, man. So I do appreciate that because I tell you don't have to make up your own stuff. It's out there. All you got to do is be and do you remember my trick of how I stayed quiet so long when people did that?
I don't know about that one.
I'd count in my head and see how high I could get. So I'd go 1001, 1002, 1003. And similar, when I was still selling windows and doors, I had a guy that rode with me because he was like, I want to see if I even want to do this. Right. And I said, well, ride with me. I said, but I made sure at the end, I said, look, we get to the end. If you say anything, we are going to have a problem because it's going to be awkward. I'm telling you, you're going to want to say something. You're going to want to release the tension in the room. But look, don't do it. And it was that actually was like the longest I had ever counted to. And it was a long time. And this lady, she was by herself, very sharp, on her game, and gave her the presentation. And man, I counted. And I got to 1,065. It's the highest I've ever gotten in my life.
Oh my God.
And because it's longer than 65 seconds because I'm like 1,001. 2003. So if your brain is busy counting, it can't be thinking about other things. So that's my trick. And if you show people that trick, they'll be able to do it.
So anytime someone talks about a porch light close or something like that, and I explain it to them, I explained that entire scenario that we went through.
Yeah.
I says, I've never seen it displayed so well.
Thank you.
As what you've done. And the reason why I teach this is because the strongest close in any industry is still silence.
Oh, yes. And for people who like to talk, it's even more difficult, right? The gift of gab will work against you in about a half a heartbeat. And that's funny. I think I was in my early 30s, maybe late 20s at the time. I
Yeah.
can't remember. So I know, I guess I had to be in my late 20s. I had to be because it's been 20 years ago.
Yeah, you're a year older than me. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. 100%. That's so good. Yeah, man, that was a good day. I love that because it was like, let's just go do it. Because you're right. I almost had no idea about the product at that point, but it was about that relationship that we're just going to sit here. And the Kirby vacuum is important, or the Rainbow, whatever it was, is important because I know they're buyers and they will buy a quality product for a quality price. And so that's why that piece of the story was so significant, right? If you can give them the value, they will buy. That's
right.
just the way it goes. And so that was a fun day, man. I appreciate that.
I remember you going over to the windows, saying, "Hey, it looks like you guys have new windows. These usually are nice." And you went over to make sure you knew that those were airtight windows.
Yes.
You were looking for that gold, and you're like, there it is.
Yeah, 100%. And that's that Me Too moment I was talking about. I wanted something in common, but it also showed that I had home improvement knowledge.
Right.
So that's the other lesson is you don't have to. So one thing that I loved about what you said, and I thought about, and I do teach this to professionals, I'm like, they assume that you are a professional. They assume that more about this than anybody. You don't have to prove a lot. So these little nuggets that you can drop, it's even better.
That's right.
And so it's that Me Too. Oh yeah, you did. Oh, me too. I used to do this and I used to do that. This company. And then you can segue that to your new company, right? Because I've never sold the cheapest product. Why would I do that? It's the cheapest.
That's right.
And I remember Zig is it's 3 closes. There's 3 reasons people buy. Would you mind if I share those with you? I'll never forget that stuff. And it's just flows, right? And so that's good, man. Right now, you've been doing Top Rep for how many years now?
So we're on our 3rd year.
Nice.
And we're on our 3rd year of selling out every event.
That's so good. Now you wrote a book a few years ago. Tell us about that? And number one, name of the book, and where can people find it?
So the book is Selling Education and Educating Sales.
Yeah.
You can find that on Amazon. We started to write this mainly for teachers because at that time I was doing a ton of speeches for the youth.
I remember.
And we realized that a lot of these teachers, either they just didn't care or they just didn't know how to sell to the student. If you could sell a lesson plan to the student, and you and I had many conversations over this.
Yep.
But that's what that book is about. And I'm currently writing a new book right now. This will be my second, and it'll be it's the field guide to results-based leadership, because sales leadership and regular leadership, if you will, they're 2 totally different things.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that even John Maxwell, and him and I've had the discussions with it, and he agrees with it. Now, I didn't think he would, but he agrees with the fact that sales management you can't do sales management with a lot of his books, just because his is very generalized leadership.
Yeah.
But then when you look at sales management, this is results based. You don't have time to sit around and wait for the end of the month to see if you made your month.
No.
This is day to day. You do what you were supposed to do, and did your team do everything they were supposed to do to put ourselves back in business every single day?
100%. You are only really as good as yesterday's results. It is more football or sports than any other thing that I can think of. Sorry to hear about your Ohio State.
I was shocked to get as far as we did.
Dude, legit. That game, it was a lot closer than I thought, because we're in the SEC too, and oftentimes we attend the Georgia track meet, because when we play them, it's a track meet, man.
It's a track.
And it sucks to be on that end of it. I'm glad when basketball season rolls around, University of Kentucky. But yeah, being in sales is akin to sports, and you really are only as good as your last game. And some people don't like when we say that, but if you don't like that, then don't go into sales, because it's going to be true, and it's always going to be true. Yeah. You really are only as good as what you've sold. And I think it's the ultimate meritocracy. Meritocracy is based on merit, and it's not an art. Sales is a science.
It is a science.
And you and I were talking about psychology and the difference between psychology and what philosophy. Yeah. And so philosophy is different than psychology. Psychology different than philosophy. You said you focus on philosophy. Why?
The reason why we choose philosophy to really help the not homeowners, the sales reps and the sales managers, is because we don't want them to get so caught up in these mind games. If I was to work with business to business, we do focus on the psychology.
Yeah.
But you only have 45 minutes to an hour with this person. And the last thing you need to, and you and I talked about, the last thing that we need to try and figure out is it came from my frontal lobe or my, they don't need to know that. They just need to know this is what I do. This is why I do it. And this is why I do it so well.
Yeah. My philosophy is Zig Ziglar. My favorite philosophy in the world is if you help enough people get what they want out of life, you can have everything in life.
I live by that every day, man.
That's a philosophy, right?
Yeah.
If you can help enough people get what they want out of life, you can have everything in life that you want. Some of the things money can buy, all the things money can't buy. That's what he said. But psychology, the reason, and I was telling you, the reason I love psychology is it's the X's and O's that set up the philosophy, right? And so when you can understand why people buy, they buy because you said it earlier, that you're there to fill a need, right? You don't have to push when they can envision themselves with what you have, and they need to trust you. And that's when you're talking about philosophy is all about trust, because when two people share the same philosophy, you build trust, right? That's the originator of that.
Right.
Yeah.
We do the same thing in sales management where we look at, but we do look at the psychology, but we look at the psychology and philosophy behind the results-based management. And we want our sales reps. I was told way back in the day that everybody's card should always say sales rep, because I want them to remember that they're in sales. And that's yes and no, because there has to be an emotion to this. If I can put an emotion to my sales reps, they're going to sell so much more.
That's
so
right.
What I do is I go in, and if I'm having 1,000 people or 10 people, it doesn't matter. I'm going to ask them and say, hey, what I want you to know right now, or I want you to do right now, is I want you to write down 10 companies that screw over the homeowner in your area. I just want whatever companies you feel that just screw over the homeowner, I want you to write those down. And I'll say, I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes. It usually takes them about 30 seconds to come up with 10 companies. And then, because what I want them to do, I says, now I want you to look at this, because now I want you to remember that last couple that bought from you. I'm sure they were a nice couple. Maybe it's an older couple. They really needed you. They looked at you as the expert. They really wanted your services. And so these people feed your family. These people give you what you have today.
Yeah.
And I want you to realize that your job is to make sure that they don't do business with anybody on that page.
That's right.
Your job is to make sure they don't do business with anybody on that page.
It's a moral.
And then I look at it and say, it is. It is. And what's the only way that we can make sure that they don't do business with anybody on that page? And there's always someone that says it. We have to close them. I said, now one call closed don't seem so bad anymore, does it?
That's right.
Because we save our homeowners. We don't sell them.
That's it, man.
Now, that's in your head, and that you're out there to throw them the lifeline of knowing that you have the best product and the best service of anybody else in the industry. You have a duty to sell that to that homeowner, to make sure that when you see them in the grocery store, that you're not ducking behind the aisles.
And that's philosophy, right?
That's philosophy.
And if everybody listening can listen to Chuck's passion about what he just said, man, that is why you become one of the best salespeople. It's not all about learning all the closing techniques, although they do help. But if you have that level of passion and that level of care for people at the end, they don't need a lot of that. Because when you talk about, and when I said the 5 hesitators, and I got them from Zig, you got a lot of stuff from Zig: no need, no want, no time, no trust, and no money. They're actually in order of importance. The no need, that's pretty simple. You wouldn't really be there or presenting to someone. If you're presenting to someone and you don't know if they need it or want it, you didn't do your job in the early stages to find out what they were needing and wanting, a needs assessment. And then the time, most people, it may be timing, right? Time or timing. But you can figure those things out. If it's just timing, they want to wait till a lot of them, you're talking about, I used to be windows and doors. A couple of weeks ago, it was 2 degrees. Well, no one wants to open up their house at 2 degrees. So how do you overcome that objection when you're selling in November? And in 30 days, it's going to be December or January. You can simply, especially if you live in Kentucky, there are days where it's 50, 60, 70, 50 and 60 degrees. And you can say, hey, look, the beauty of you buying today is demand is lower in the winter. So number one, because of that, I can usually give you a better rate if it comes down to it. But number two, we'll be able to pick and choose which days more flexible that you are, and you won't have to wait for that to happen. And so you can, that's how you start to overcome those hesitators. That's why they're hesitators, timing. The other one is trust. The hardest objection to overcome is the one you create. I learned that from Tom Hopkins. And if you create a objection, that is usually a trust issue. Now, sometimes they don't trust themselves. It just depends on what your product is. So we do training, and a lot of people don't trust that they will execute it. Not that they don't trust you. They trust me and Chuck most of the time. They don't trust themselves to be able to execute what they're learning. Is that true, Chuck?
It is very true.
So trust isn't just about you. It's about, or they don't trust that it will work for them as far as product and service. So those are the 3 sides of trust. And then money, I tell people money's not real. Money's everywhere. They're handing money, or it's like candy, honestly. Especially if you have the right target market, they're never going to have a money objection. So those are the 5. And if you can just overcome those, you're good. But your presentation should be designed to do that. Tell them Chuck, how do you help people design their presentation to overcome those hesitators? So at the end, they're not trying to use all the closing techniques.
Again, we go through a certain process so that we answer all the questions that need to be answered. We have gotten all the commitments that we were needing to get before we have earned the right to give them a price. You have to earn the right to give them a price.
I love that. At the end, we're going to come to the end. There's 3 stages of business. There's a startup stage, there's the growth stage, and there's the scaling stage. What is your best piece of advice for people, entrepreneurs, business owner in their startup phase?
They first need to nail down their processes. When they're starting up, they need to look at their processes, but also how can they start to differentiate themselves? Because that doesn't cost anything.
Oh, wow.
You know, it really doesn't. To differentiate themselves doesn't cost anything. So when you're in that startup stage, it's all about cost. How can I not put myself out of business this year? And I hate the phrase, it takes money to make money.
I do too.
Because it kills more companies than it helps.
It's funny. Number one, I'm going to throw something at you. You said it doesn't cost anything to differentiate yourself. And immediately I thought it costs you everything not to do it.
It does.
Oh, that'll preach, right? We say that down south. The other thing is when you look at the numbers, startups that have $1 million, do you realize they fail more than startups that have $100? Because their lack of resourcefulness. When you can just throw money at it, you will.
Right.
When you start with $100, every business I've started is like no debt, no money. Right? We're just going to get after it, selling, those types of things. And that's what we've done. We sell first. If you can't sell it before you actually create a company, you shouldn't create a company. That's my philosophy.
You're right. Because you have no way of making the money. There are so many people out there that know how to do it, but they have no way of selling it.
Pre-sell it.
That's going to be huge. Right? Yeah.
You know, if I wanted to get into roofing, if I knew how to roof, which I don't want to, if I were to get into roofing, I would go and find my first client. That's right. What I would do. I would say, I'm into roofing. I look at your roof. I see this. If I could be insured, would you use me? Nope. Okay, good. Go to the next person. If I could be insured, would you use me? Yes. Awesome. When would you like to have your roof done? Because I'm in the process of being insured. I'll be done in 6 months. I can't wait that long. Perfect. Go to the next person. Hey, you wait 6 months. What's wrong with that? Nothing.
There's nothing wrong with it.
No.
You got to start somewhere.
It costs you $0 to ask.
That's right.
So now I'm through my startup phase. I'm in my growth stage. What advice do you have for me?
So inside your growth stage is where it's like what I call the people stage. You got to go out and draft your players. If I'm working with a sales manager and if they're a new sales manager, I even tell them, I says, you have a whole sales team right now. It doesn't matter. You need to draft your players because here in about 6 months, we're going to start looking at you because of your team. And you better know who's on your team and if they deserve to be on the team. Do you have the right people? Are they trained? So we need to start getting, when people are like, oh, how do I get a phone room? You start with one caller.
Yeah,
People come
absolutely.
into a lot of my clients, they'll go into like masters and say, how do I get that phone room? I just want you to know it started with one. They got 10 now, but it started with one.
What do you think about people? You're hiring someone and they said, I don't want to be trained. I'm good.
Next.
No, they're not coachable. Man,
Same thing with people are like,
you mentioned Tom Hopkins. I bought a CD set of his 24 years ago or something. And I actually won a sales contest. I was selling Yellow Pages. So that'll date old Bear. They came in and they had a sales contest for a ticket to see Tom Hopkins in Louisville, Kentucky. And if you were the top salesperson, you were going to win this ticket. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to be a part of that. And I would just hunker down, smiling and dialing, baby, and I won. And didn't know hardly anything about sales back then, except for what I read in Ziegler and Tom. But I knew I wanted that. So I set that goal. And so I won the sales contest. And I went there and it's a 1-day thing. I'm like taking notes, rocking and rolling. And he said, the CD sets are in the back. And it was $300. And I remember I had a $300 credit card. I was newly married. $300 credit card was the max. And I went back there and I maxed it out, dude. And I opened up that CD set and I drove home and I listened to that. And my wife's like, you did what? Like you would have thought, you know what I mean? You would have thought that I had maxed out $300,000, a second mortgage. Back then it felt like it. And so I committed to listening to that thing over and over again. And even today, 24 years later, I listen to that thing once a year and I do the workbook once a year. I print out the workbook and I do the workbook and I go back to the basics. Training freaking works. And like you said, Chuck, how long ago did we work together?
Gosh, that had to have been 10 years ago.
It was longer than that, brother.
I think it was,
Chuck, I started our business 10 years ago.
It could have, it should have, probably around 15 years ago then.
It's almost 20 years. It's probably 17 years because we started Auto Excel in 2009, 2011. That's 11 years ago, right?
Right.
I started this business about 8 years ago. So yeah, 14 years ago, 14 or 15 years ago. You're right.
Yeah.
So you said, man, you could do Tom Hopkins word for word. And I'm like, yeah, that's why. And I still do it because that $300 class means so much to me. It still hurts thinking about it today. And I have more than $300.
I'll never forget Tom Hopkins giving people M&Ms to think about.
Yes. So how about the growth stage? Tell them what's your advice in the growth stage.
So again, we started out, we went into the growth stage. The growth stage is people. You got to go grow through people and make sure that you have the right people. Don't go into the assessments too much. You have to have the assessments, but you don't hire and fire by them, but to make sure that you have the right people and you continue to grow through your people. You can chase success through your people.
Yeah, I love that. Now the scaling stage. Tell me about the scaling.
So with scaling, that's usually when you bring in an expert. That's when you bring in somebody that understands the business, challenges you, sets new goals for you, and then you're perfecting everything. You're going to bring everything together to make sure that you understand where you're going. But also, it's never too late to start managing by the numbers or running your business by the numbers. Yeah. It's still emotional, but I use this analogy of when we go into the Olympics, every 4 years, do you feel that we just get faster? They're setting new world records, right? Do we just get faster every 4 years? No, someone sets the bar and then they work towards that bar.
That's
So
exactly right.
when we go into a company, it was not too long ago. I went into a company here in Cincinnati and they were at $3 million in June. And he says, man, we really want to be at 12 million sometime in the next 5 years. I got him to 14 million in that same year. And people are like, how did you do it? I said, for one, the production manager hated me. But two, we looked at the numbers. We knew exactly what needed to happen in every month. We looked at the bell curve for every month. And we just knew what we had to hit. Just like when you look at the Olympics, they just knew who they had to beat, what time they had to beat. And that's what they practiced for. They wanted to beat that time. So if we could take and go all the way out 8 years, can you imagine what that Olympian would do if they says, hey, I bet you anything, they're going to beat it by an eighth of a point or whatever, eighth of a second. So I'm going to beat it by a half. That's what they're going for. You're going to start getting world records faster, but you're also going to start getting your company's numbers faster. You're breaking down barriers. You're not waiting for these people say over the next 10 years and they start building their company like this. You know that nobody knows how long you've been in business. It's not, oh, so you've been in business 5 years. We're only going to give you so much business. The world doesn't work like that. If you know how much needs to come in through the front door and how to get it through the back, I wouldn't suggest it, but you can build a $20 million company in a year.
Yeah, that's good. It's just, and I love what you used on that. And it's an age old, the first mile was broken.
Yeah.
And it was 3 minutes and 59 seconds. Did you know that?
I didn't know. I knew it was Roger Bannister, but
yeah, it's Roger Bannister. 3 minutes, 59 seconds and something.
Yeah.
Like right on the money. And do you know what they told them if a human broke a 4 minute, what would happen? Do you remember?
Their heart would explode.
That's it. Yeah. Their heart would explode. And then do you know who Jim Ryan is?
That one I don't.
You know, I'm a track guy. I ran it in fast I ever did a mile was 4:43, which is still pretty good. But Jim Ryan broke the 4 minute mile as a high schooler in 1966 or something. And he ran it in 3:51. Then he set the world record years later at, I think, 3:03 or something like that. And it was just broke. Oh, yeah. 3:33 is the new world record. And it was just broke in 2021. So Jim Ryan in 1967 or whatever. So he was crushing after that. And after Roger Bannister broke it, it was broken that next year like 4 or 5 times. So I like what you just said that because you can keep breaking those records.
That's right.
The human body gets faster, but not because it gets stronger. Now, who knows the mystery, right? So you just got to be a consummate learner. One last piece of advice that you would give anyone.
Man, the best piece of advice that I would give anybody in sales is just make sure that who's on your team and where you're going. That is probably the most important thing to understand is who's on the team and where are you going?
Yeah.
Because those are the first 2 things they forget.
Yeah. Rohn, not Jim Ryan. Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you can get around 5 of the best salespeople you ever known, like that's going to be your average. And man, that's a great time. That's good.
That is.
Well, Chuck, it was absolutely fantastic to have you on the podcast. One of my favorite people in the world. I think so much of you and respect you. Where can people find you?
Easiest way to find me is on Facebook and LinkedIn. I respond to any of the messages, but also look us up on the internet, topreptraining.com for any of the events. I have yet to have anybody come through that and not break their own records.
Love it. I love it, man. Thank you so much. You have a great day.